Hi, I'm Rachel Lancaster, and this is the Magnificent Midlife Podcast. This is where we celebrate women in midlife and beyond. We challenge the status quo and bash those negative stereotypes about being an older woman. We're not over the hill at 40, 50, 60. We're just getting started. And the world needs us now more than ever. I'll be talking all things midlife, about the issues that matter, and sharing fabulous stories of amazing women doing very cool stuff. Now's our time. My guest today is Julie Owen Moylan, and she's a writer whose short stories and articles have appeared in the New Welsh Review, Horizon Literary Review, and the Voice of Women in Wales anthology. And she's also won awards for films, and she's going to tell us all about her writing and her filmmaking and everything else, I hope, today. So welcome, Julie. It's lovely to have you here.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm really pleased to be here.
So we met on Twitter, which is where I meet a lot of rather brilliant women, I have to say. And Julie, you describe yourself as a Twitter ranter and a Welsh feminist, don't you?
On occasion, I have been known to have the odd Twitter rant. I think my lovely people who follow me, who I love to refer to as my tweetards, will tell you that, yes, if something is annoying me, then I have been known to express that annoyance quite strongly at times. They're quite
we like that.
Yeah, they're quite used to it now. I think probably they just probably mute me until it's over and I go back to telling jokes or something, or writing or tweeting about books.
I'm going to dig into that a little bit later on because you have a huge Twitter following, and I wanted to dig into that. But first of all, I would love to know how do you come to be working on your first novel at, she whispered, nearly 60?
Nearly 60, yes. I'm a very late developer, I think it would be fair to say. I always wanted to be a writer. From the time I was a tiny girl, I read Little Women. I think, like most little girls, I fell in love with Jo. I wanted to write in a garret somewhere. And I was a very creative child. I belonged to the drama group and I wrote little stories. But I grew up in a kind of household and went to the kind of school where we didn't know anybody who was a writer. Writing wasn't a job. I think most of the books that I read were by writers who were dead. So I thought maybe that was a qualification for being a writer, that you might actually have to be dead. So I did, I think, what a lot of women do. I deleted it from my list of possibilities, from my list of careers before I'd even kind of got started. And I left school at 16 and went to train to be a hairdresser because that was a useful thing that everybody could understand. Obviously, I could make a fortune now if I could go near anybody. That'd be very popular. But I gave that up after a few years and went a different path. When I got into midlife, I started a journey of trying to go back and find out all the bits that I'd left behind. It was like archaeology, really. It was kind of excavating. I'd done quite a lot of things by the time I got to 40, but I didn't know that I'd done them for me. I'd seemed to be pleasing other people or meeting other people's expectations in some way. And I felt like I'd got to 40 and I'd left part of me behind at about 15 or 16. So I went back to find it. And it took a while because I'm obviously quite a bit slow on the uptake, really. But it was like kind of chasing a little trail. So when I got to, I think, about 50, I thought, I am going to write. That's what I want to do. And I set about doing it. And I listened to a lot of kind of inspirational podcasts and read a lot of inspirational literature. And I hate the bit where somebody goes from, I meditated for 5 minutes and I literally had a flash of lightning and then I knew my path. And then the next day I sat next to somebody on the bus who turned out to be, the person who was going to set me on my path. None of that happened. None of it. It took me ages. I had to work really hard. I got rejected millions of times. I gave up. I drank enormous glasses of wine and cried quite a lot, because I think it's important for people to not miss that bit out, that there's a lot of work, there's a lot of heartbreak. Persistence is really important. And lots of times I sat down and went, this is really stupid. You're too old to do this. And, why are you even thinking about this? And maybe you're like the writing equivalent of the people who go on X Factor and can't sing. And all their families are going, oh, but she's got a lovely voice. and the rest of us are going, make it stop. So I went through all of that. And I did have some success with short stories. And I set about writing a novel. And some of it was good, and a lot of it wasn't executed enough to be picked up by somebody. I had some quite good feedback, enough to keep me going, but also so many rejections that I was tempted to delete it and whatever. So I thought about giving up for a while, and I decided to give it one more go. And I enrolled on the Faber Academy writing course, because I felt I just needed some way to get some professional feedback, which is what I did. And I started a new project, a new book, and went through that process. And one of the lovely things about that process, other than getting the feedback, is you do get the opportunity at the end of the course to put in a couple of thousand words of the beginning of your book. And Faber put it out in an anthology, and it goes out to all the literary agents. And that's what happened, that one day I was sat at home just before Christmas, and all of these emails started falling into my inbox from lit agents from amazing agencies. And it was like right at Christmas. I couldn't believe it. I kept calling my husband every 5 minutes saying, oh my God, somebody wants my full manuscript. Oh my God. So that was amazing. And then it usually, anyone who's ever been through any kind of submission process in publishing knows it usually takes an age for anyone to feed back to you. But literally the next day, I had people saying, I've read it. Can you come to my office next week? And I was just stunned. I thought, this can't be happening. And right up until, I think, the moment I set foot in those offices, I was still thinking, they're just going to say, well, yeah, nice to meet you. Thanks for coming. Bye, Julie. Because obviously, why? Why would we? But they didn't, and I sat in multiple offices, which again is unbelievably humbling to do, and after such a long period of working for it. And I was offered representation by some amazing women and got my fantastic agent now. And we've been going through an editing process on the manuscript to really make it as good as it can be. And we're ready to roll, but then the pandemic hit. So we think we're probably going to send it out June or July now. And there we go. So yeah, it was years of really hard work, and then a nice payoff in the end, when I got to the point where I almost didn't care whether it happened anymore.
There's so many wonderful things in that, though, in that story. One is, I just love that you just kept going, because I think so many of us give up. It is so tempting to give up, isn't it? And yet when you have a dream, when you have a desire, and when you, I suppose, lean into that and really feel it, then I suppose maybe that gave you the strength to just literally keep going. But how exciting. My goodness me. Wow. That's just such a brilliant story of how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, it's been an amazing, year so far. I mean, this happened just before Christmas, so it's been a lot of work, but it's been just so joyful to be on the other side of the door for a change, because I was so tired of getting rejections or silence, which is anyone who's been through this kind of submission process will know that, because agents are so busy, they get so many submissions, often they can't come back and say, oh, I'm sorry, you really are a good writer, you should keep on trying. And if you don't hear that from people, then it's really difficult to find that in yourself, I think. And I gave up lots of times, but I didn't give up for very long. I'm quite determined like that. I'm just very stubborn, I think. And yeah, I got to the point where I thought this may never work. But my husband has a lovely phrase, actually. As he always says, well, we have a certain amount of heartbeats and none of us know how many we have. So how are you going to spend your precious heartbeats? And if writing is the thing that makes you happy, that you enjoy that, and yes, you want a book in a bookshop and you want that really desperately, but even if that didn't happen, is it still a good use of your heartbeats? And when I looked at that, I thought to myself, actually, yes, it is, because I don't want to do anything else here, so that's what we did.
I've got goosebumps now. I've just come over all tingly. Is it a good use of your heartbeats? Oh, I'm going to use that one. I'm going to pinch that. That is just a brilliant line. Is it a good use of your heartbeats? Wow. And it has to involve your heart, doesn't it, as well? It has to. It's not just the physical beating of the heart, but it has to electrify the heart. And I think that is such a theme of women in midlife. I mean, I love that you talked about excavating and looking for what it was that you wanted. And I love that idea of going back and working out, what did you leave behind? What do you miss? What had you not used in, that stage of your life? And I think so many women get to midlife and exactly do that process, that they excavate. I mean, it's no coincidence to me now that, I started out my career and I came out of college. I wanted to be a journalist. My father and my mother both worked for the BBC. And I tried to get into the BBC and I got rejected. And I ended up, by a very circuitous route, I ended up as a sort of editor on a data product and online. It was the first starting of the world online, really. And it was for Reuters. So it was a big name, it was Reuters. And I felt I was good. Whereas actually the job I was doing was really not a very good job at all and terribly boring. And then I went off on another big journey and route. And yet here I am now. What am I doing? I am broadcasting. And I have gone back and I've excavated what I wanted and what I didn't then do.
Yeah.
And it gives me joy. And it's like, is it a good use of my heartbeats? Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
It's so exciting.
You can have that. Everybody can have that. Take it with my blessing. I stole it from my husband. So there you go. Brilliant. I steal a lot of my best stuff from my husband. It has to be fair.
Just brilliant. So when you were excavating, you talked about having done a lot before 40.
Yeah.
So what were you doing? What were you excavating around in?
After I stopped hairdressing, I wanted to go out into the world. I wanted to travel. And I had no money and I had no resources. So I saw an advert in a magazine for a job as an agency for au pairs. So I thought, I can do that. I had no idea what an au pair was. I didn't know anything about the Canary Islands, which is where I ended up. I didn't know where they were. I couldn't speak any Spanish. I had no idea what I was doing. And most importantly, I had no money to come home again. I never met the family. Never met the family, never set eyes on them. I literally left and landed, and somebody picked me up in their car and took me to their house and gave me their children, which was interesting. But what it taught me was a different way of living, because once you live in another culture for a while and you pick up a lot of the language, by the time I was ready to come home, about a year later, I wanted to do something else. I'd worked in shops and bars. I'd been a hairdresser. I'd done a lot of, very good but ordinary kind of jobs. And I wanted something else. I wanted a kind of career. And I had no idea really how to get a career except via education. And I didn't know really at the time how to access that. But when I came back home, I was too young to be a mature student at the time, which seems really silly now. But you had to be 23 then to be considered without any qualifications, because I didn't have A levels. And so I went to a kind of what they call a second chance college. It's a trade union sponsored college. And I did a couple of years there, and that got me into university, which was kind of a big deal, because I was the only person in my family who'd ever been to university, even to clean it, I think. I mean, none of us had set foot in a university. But I still didn't know what I wanted to do, but I kind of felt this responsibility that I've gotten to university now and I need to get the degree, but I had no idea what I was going to do with the degree. And so at the end of it, I did something very predictable, really, is I got my degree. I did my teacher training, because that's a proper job that everybody can understand and seemed to be acceptable to my little committee I carried around in my head of people. And I taught in further education for a number of years. And I enjoyed it. I loved teaching 16-year-olds. It was a lot of fun. And I taught adults in management training. And then when I got into my 30s, I was on a bit of a roll, and I was ticking boxes and doing what you do. Yes, I have somewhere to live. And yes, I have a career. And yes, I have someone, And so I decided I was going to set up my own business doing customer training and corporate training. And I set it up from scratch and did it for, years and years and years. And I had a lot of contracts with quite a lot of big names, but it didn't bring me joy. It was a way of earning reasonable amount of money. And I was able to buy a little house and all the rest of it. But I wasn't really fulfilled. And then I got married and we moved to a different part of the country. And I had a choice to make about whether to do a lot of long distance travel to carry on doing training things, or to take a little moment to think about, what am I going to do? Do I want to start again here? Or do I want to take this moment to do something completely different? And that's where the excavation started, really. We were doing up an old money pit of a house, and I was kind of overseeing the renovation and spending my days with builders and plasterers and everybody else. It was like a house full, and it was just an interesting experience. But I started from that point of kind of, okay, if I was going to do something, then what would it be? And that led me really to start reading things and looking around. I was just looking for clues, really. It was like a little bit of detective work. And then I started to remember when I was in school, and I was this kid that would write stories and put on plays, and was part of the drama group, and was just a very creative kind of child. And I left that behind, and I thought, oh, well, why don't I start there? So I did.
Creativity is often something that we lose, or we just don't pay attention to it. And something I've found, the older I get, the more creative I want to be. I've never thought of myself as creative, and yet, just doing this is creative, isn't it? And
yeah.
But it's so important, I think, to women in particular.
Yes, I think because very often so few of us can see a path to making a living out of a creative life. And it is hard. I mean, in the creative arts, it's hard to make a living, and most writers don't make enough to pay their bills. So as people get busy, I think, in their jobs and the things that they do to pay the bills, which are very important, and they can love those jobs. I enjoyed most of the jobs that I did. There were good things, and there was fun, and there were friends. But at the same time, I didn't really have the energy outside of that job particularly when I was teaching, because I was just exhausted all the time. And I didn't have the energy to come home and start writing. And I take my hat off, because I know that there are women out there who have written things while traveling on the bus to work, or, you know, while their kids are in bed. And I take my hat off to them, because that's hard. But yeah, I just tried to forget about that part of me while I was kind of working, and focus on the little checklist I think that most people have. Oh, can I afford a flat, or can I afford a house, or where's this job going? Have I met the person I want to be with yet? Can I afford a nice holiday, or shall I get my driving license? And all of those just really normal things that seem to take over everything else.
But you have a book now. That's an amazing achievement. You have completed a book. It's incredible.
I have completed a manuscript that will hopefully be a book, yes.
Yeah. So can you tell us about it, or is it all top secret?
No, I can tell you a little bit about it. No spoilers, obviously. And the working title at the moment is City of Broken Things. And that can change, obviously, because if it gets picked up by a publisher, as we seriously hope that it will. It's got a lot of editors interested in reading it so far, so that's great. And it's a story set in 2 time periods. It's in a very long, hot summer of 1975 in New York City. We have a 15-year-old, Ava, who has a mother who's going through a breakdown. And we have a father who's kind of partially moved out and is having an affair. And in the middle of this chaos, this mysterious kind of box arrives from Paris, full of somebody else's personal effects, and has journals and all kinds of things in there. And that unravels another narrative, which takes place in 1955, of a woman called Dovey Carmichael, who at the time was in a relationship with another woman at a time that it was illegal in New York. And so it goes back and forth between 1975 and Ava's story and her trying to unravel this mystery, and Dovey's story. So we find out what happened to them. And I'm really proud of it. I think it's lovely. And I hope that people will get to read it, and in vast numbers, and they enjoy it. And it, you know, uplifts people and makes them cry a bit, but in a really good way. All tears.
Oh, it sounds wonderful. How did you come up with the idea for it?
It just came to me. I started with an idea of a scenario that I'd had in my notebook for a little while, which is just, what would it be like if this young girl had this mother who wasn't very well, and what would that relationship be like? But what I do with my writing is I try to have a kind of outline, but really I like to get to know the characters. And I really kind of peel off layers and layers and layers of those characters until I feel like I can really know them and I really inhabit them. And so when I started writing, the characters just did something that I wasn't expecting. And then from there, I worked out the plot to go with it.
I was going to ask you that, actually, because writers talk about the characters writing it themselves, that they kind of take over. Was it something a bit like that? Did they lead you? I
think yes, they do. I think there are all kinds of different writers, and everyone will have their own process. I think some people are very plot focused, and they love to get their outline and their plot, and the characters just kind of fit in because they just need woman A to do this stuff. And then I think there are other writers that are very character-led, and they really, once they breathe life into that person is going to live their life, and you just kind of follow them. And yeah, it's kind of a bit of a magical process in that when it goes well, on the days where it flows, then it is a really magical process. And on the days where you're sat there sighing and staring at your blank screen and going, oh, why does anyone want to do this job? This is stupid. This is torture. But then you get an idea. And I find that if I turn up, eventually some little muse will sit on my shoulder and whisper to me that, oh, what about this? And then off you go.
And do you have any kind of process to allow that muse to get there? What do you do if you're like stuck, or do you have a way of starting to write each day? Do you have any sort of rituals and things
I don't have any kind of magical Zen rituals to writing. I used to be quite fussy about it because I used to need kind of quiet, and I'm less fussy about that now, really. I think if you start off with a ritual, if you can't do your ritual, then it inhibits you from writing. I do have a useful belief, and I've always had a useful belief, and my belief was always, somewhere out there in the ether, this book already exists. So I just have to transmit it. And that takes the pressure off me, because I don't have to feel like I'm making it up. I can feel that it's already there. If I'm quiet and I pay attention, this book's gonna get written. And I'm in the middle of that process at the moment because I'm working on book 2.
Oh.
So it's been interesting to start this process again. And it's a stuttering process, but it doesn't worry me now because I've done it before. So I go, yeah, that's okay. That idea is not really panning out. Oh, that idea feels juicy. And then you go from there. And then I start researching maybe what time period I want to play with, because you sit with a book for a long time. It's like dating somebody for a very long time. And and if you have an idea, I think you sit there on a first date with your idea and you think, do I want to be with this idea for probably about the next year or so? And it needs to feel really juicy. It needs to feel like, yeah, there's loads of possibilities and turns you could take. Because if it feels just dry and lifeless at the beginning and you're struggling, then maybe it's not going to work. So I don't have any magical rituals, but I do turn up. That's my magical ritual.
That sounds like a pretty magical ritual. They say, don't they, to write, you've got to write. You've got to literally turn up and write, however rubbish it is. If you don't, you won't write.
Yeah, you do have to turn up. Not every day is a writing day. Some days are thinking days, and some days I like to distract my writing brain, because my writing brain is really clever. The rest of my brain maybe not so great, but my writing brain is very clever if I don't interrupt it. So I can go off and bake something or tweet or watch Netflix and say, right, have you got it yet? No, you don't have it yet. Okay, right. And so it's like waiting for something to come to fruition. But I do always turn up. I do always turn up and go and check in with are we ready to roll yet? What about this character? What would we call her? And then I look up names, and then I think, oh, that's an interesting period. What songs were popular in that period? And then I'm trying to get myself in the mood and give myself those kind of ideas of that, put myself in that period, and then give that character life and possibilities. And then we get some plotting going on, and we get to all the juicy stuff. And then we have to edit it forever then.
Have you read Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic?
Yes, I love Elizabeth Gilbert.
She talks about that notion of the story existing out there somewhere and it coming to you.
Yes.
I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I think a lot of us love to have beliefs in anything that will take the pressure off us. Because if I have to sit down and think, oh, I'm going to make up an imaginary world and imaginary people and a plot, and I have to write it in such a way that people will want to read it and will want to turn the pages and won't then just go, oh, well, I could have done better than that and give it 1 star on Amazon, which is like every writer's nightmare. It's like, or even worse, give it 1 star because it didn't arrive on time, which again is every writer's worst nightmare. It's like,
oh my goodness.
if you're listening to this, don't ever do that. That causes writers to cry a lot. Unless you're going to supply wine with your 1 star, please just don't do it.
But lots of wine. Lots of wine.
We're a sensitive bunch of people.
Oh yeah. Oh my goodness. So let's talk a little bit about Twitter, because you do have an enormous following. How did this come about?
Well, back at the time when I was going through more of an excavation period, I liked the idea of social media, but I was quite ambivalent about it. I would kind of dip a little toe in, then no, go delete it and walk away again. I didn't like it very much. I wasn't sure what to say really, or how to say it, and I didn't want negative attention or any attention some days. I found it quite difficult. So I spent a couple of years probably putting up Twitter accounts and then deleting them again. And I was just, no, I don't like this. And what happened was I started my Twitter account about 4 years ago or so now. And I was just thinking, right, I'm going to do this as a kind of to be part of the writer community and to chat to people about writing. So I used to do quite lovely tweets about writing and books and lovely things. I got up this morning, wrote some words, lovely. And consequently, I didn't have many followers, obviously. It wasn't that interesting. And then, as in life, I think, the same in Twitter, as I stopped kind of filtering myself in life and started getting back to, well, hang on, what happened to Julie? What happened to her? When I started getting back to who I was and being very at peace with who I was, then I just started tweeting out what I thought about things. And it has become just a kind of stream of consciousness now. It's a really kind of what mood I'm in when I get up in the morning. And sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's angry. There are things I feel passionately about. And a lot of people have been with me for a lot of years. So it's kind of nice because you feel like you've got a bunch of friends out there, really, which, and we have in jokes and all that kind of thing. So yeah, it's just built and built, which is crazy. But I think the more that I was me and started putting out things that were interesting me or just annoying me or making me laugh, so I found that people actually responded to that. And yeah, it just grew and grew and grew. And I have really no idea why anybody follows me at all. I can only imagine that they have me on mute and this is just, they've forgotten some time ago. But yeah, I have no idea. But I am delighted that they do and that they seem to enjoy the rambling content of my head some days.
No, but you are very interesting. And I think you like to mix it up sufficiently that we're not quite sure what's she going to say next. There's an element of she's not always on one track, and then she'll go off over here. I do find that, and I love that. It's very
you never know what you're going to get.
No, exactly.
On any given day, that it could be a major rant about the state of the world. It can be some injustice and unfairness that I am boiling mad about. It could be trying to be a voice of reason when I see a lot of fake news or people getting really upset and screaming at each other on Twitter. And I sometimes try to take the middle path, and it's a dangerous path sometimes because you try to explain both sides to people. Very often they're like, I don't want to know the other side. And I'm like, okay, that's good. Won't try that again then. And then, some days it's just life in my literature mind, what I'm doing, how I'm writing, what that's like. So yeah, it's been fun. I really enjoy Twitter. I know a lot of people don't enjoy Twitter, but I found a way that works for me. That means that I don't have all of the kind of bad side of Twitter. I have a very long block list too, I have to say. I don't.
Do you?
Yeah.
I was going to ask about that. Yeah, because it can be a nasty place, can't it? So how do you deal with it? You just block them.
Yeah, basically. I see a lot of other women who have great difficulties on Twitter, and I have enormous sympathy for that, because there are some odd people out there, or people that just like to try and hurt and wound. I'm a big fan of Maya Angelou, and she used to have a lovely phrase which she would not tolerate in other people, is what she called little murders, which is people, as she would say, who don't have the courage to actually murder you, but they want to do it with their words. They want to snipe at you or hurt you and belittle you in such a way that they really don't like you. And so I just thought, well, then there is no point in life or Twitter having those people around you, because what is the point if somebody doesn't like you? So yeah, I like to debate with people, and I have people who feel very passionately about the other side of things, or a different political persuasions to me, or have different views on all kinds of things, and we have mostly very respectful, passionate debates. But yeah, if people are rude to me, then I don't amplify that. I see sometimes women amplify it because they tweet it out, the abuse, and I don't amplify it. I block straight away. Occasionally I give them a few choice swear words first and then block them. But yeah, I respond to it. I go back hard, because I won't allow anyone. I'm nobody's punch bag in life, nor on Twitter. And so, and that's worked for me, I think, by blocking a lot of people who don't actually really want to engage with you. Sometimes because, I can be compassionate about it. I see that, so a lot of the time people are stressed, or they're working out pain in their own life and wounds in their own life that they haven't dealt with, and they need to lash out. And Twitter's a good forum for lashing out. You can be anonymous. But yeah, not me, thanks. And I don't allow people to message me unless I'm following them. So I don't allow people to just send me pictures of their genitals and stuff, without permission. No, I mean, I don't want them. Don't tell me. No. But generally, I have to say that I have a lovely Twitter community, and hopefully if they listen to this, I will say, hello, tweetards, I think you're all lovely and smashing and very smart, clever people. But they do inform me and entertain me. They make me laugh every day. And it's just a little bit of company. I think writing's a very solitary thing. And in this world of lockdown, we all need to reach a hand out across the internet, I think, sometimes, and just say, yeah, I'm here, are you okay? And we do that too. So that's nice. And I think if social media can be great if you can get the right crowd, and you have to, sometimes you have to block a lot of people to get a good experience, but you can get one.
Well, I think you've proved that, because I think a lot of women are, they'd rather go to Instagram, which has a sort of a friendlier feel to it than Twitter. I know, occasionally I've got into trouble on Twitter, and when I express an opinion, and people crawl out from nasty little corners.
They do. Yeah.
And as you say, they just want to attack, and there's that great, psychology adage, it always says much more about them than it does about you.
Sure.
But I think it's great that you've managed to find a way that, as you say, works for you.
Yeah.
And you're very straight down the line with what you say, you don't mince your words, but somehow you do it in a way that people respond to well, rather than respond to aggressively. And I think I need to take lessons from you, because I was trying to do that, but I didn't manage it.
Yeah, it's I am a very straight talker on Twitter and in life. I've learned to do that as I've got older. I was not very good at it when I was a young woman. I was too smiley and too accommodating and too people pleasing. I was always opinionated. Well, all women are opinionated. It's just most of them don't give their opinions in public. They give their opinions behind closed doors all the time. Women never stop telling each other what their opinions are. We love to do that. We've done it. We've always done it. But putting your opinion out there in the world for everybody to knock down, I think, is something that everybody has to work at. And it took me a while to be comfortable with it. And I've tried to find a way to speak my truth without telling other people that that's the truth they have to believe. I offer my truth to you. I don't say to you, well, you have to take my truth. And if it depends what that truth is, because I do have zero tolerance of racists or anything like that. I will not even have that debate. There is nothing to discuss. So if somebody wants to come back at me and say, well, I don't agree with your particular truth on this, then yeah, they're probably going to get blocked, because there's no point having that discussion. But for most other things, I'm like, okay, then persuade me of your truth. And sometimes I'm happy to look at both sides of things. But yeah, I'm not trying to persuade anybody particularly. I'm not running for office. I'm just somebody trying to be as good a writer as I can be. And I like Twitter. And so a lot of the time I'm just talking to me. It's what amuses me. It's what I think. Like most writers, sometimes I don't know what I think until I write it down. And I find Twitter helpful for that.
And have you encountered sexism and ageism on Twitter?
No. Well, I've had... Actually, when I look at my Twitter analytics, I have mostly men that follow me, actually. And really nice men, very respectful, lovely men. And so, yeah, not very much, actually. I mean, I've had a few comments over the years to which I go back hard and tell them to sling their hook in no uncertain. I channel my inner Nessa. And I say...
You have to explain who Nessa is, because this is a global podcast, and I didn't know who Nessa was.
Okay. There is a TV series that the BBC made called Gavin and Stacey. And Nessa is a very blunt Welsh woman and who speaks very directly. And she's played by the fantastic actress from Cardiff, Ruth Jones, who doesn't live very far away from me, in fact. So there you go. That's who Nessa is. But yes, look up Nessa. I'm sure you'll find clips on YouTube wherever you are in the world.
Yes, I think she's been giving some coronavirus advice, hasn't she?
Yes, she did do a coronavirus advice thing, yeah. So yeah, she's very funny, and Ruth's very great writer and really good comedy writer. So yes, I do occasionally channel my inner Nessa and tell people to go away. But I really do get, maybe I just give off that vibe of don't mess with me, because I get very little in the way of abuse or stuff like that. Very, very little indeed. I hope I give off that vibe, because it's completely deliberate. I don't want to be messed with. So I try to give off that vibe in life too, which is like, really, I'm too old for this drama. Don't bring me a drama. Don't want it. I'm not interested. Don't want to fight with you for fun.
But I think that's actually what's so powerful, and one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the podcast is because you are an older woman who's got a very strong voice and who manages to have that voice on a very public platform without actually, you're able to do it, and you're able to do it consistently, and you're not shy and retiring, and it's fantastic. I think that's really, really powerful that you can do that. And you've got some very strong views on aging and women, haven't you?
Yeah.
And you wrote a lovely piece recently. I'd love to just hear a little bit about your views on women and aging.
Well, I was on Twitter, and I'd started seeing a lot of posts coming across my feed from younger women saying, oh my God, please tell me, if I don't get my book published by the time I'm 30, I'll be okay. Or, oh my God, please tell me there's life after 40. Because so much of what people see and hear would lead you to believe that it's all going to be hairnets and cat food after 40.
Hairnets and cat food. I usually say knitting in a corner, but
Yeah,
hairnets
exactly.
and cat food, I like that.
And it's just going to be, and I used to think this when I was a younger woman, that because the older women that I knew, like my grandmother and my aunties, were old, but they were kind of old when they turned 40 in that time. And it took me a long time to realize, and I think I was probably got to 50 before I thought, do you know what? You are still going to be the kind of woman that goes to rock gigs because that's what you do. You are still going to be the kind of woman that, likes to go to holiday, and in cities and explore cities on foot. And I suddenly realized I wasn't going to ever turn into this caricature of whatever it was I thought an old woman was in my head. And then when I started to really think about it and read more widely and look at some quieter voices, I realized there are loads of older women out there doing great stuff and having amazing lives. And just younger women can't hear them. So I wrote a blog post, just trying to reach a hand out really and just say that, look, when I was in my 20s and 30s, I was trying to please other people. I was carrying this little committee of toxic voices around and expectations in my head. And yeah, I had some fun and I traveled a little bit and I had some jobs I liked doing. But I wasn't me, really. I wasn't doing it for me. I wasn't fully me. I was always me, but I wasn't fully authentically me. I wasn't a woman who would stand in a room and say, yeah, well, this is who I am. And if you don't like that, then that's okay. And really, that's okay. Not, well, you can go then. Really, that's okay. I'm not for everybody. If I was for everybody, that would make me a very bland kind of a woman. And everybody likes to be liked. Of course we do. We all want that. But I don't need it. I want the people I love to love me back. That's quite important, obviously. But not strangers. I don't need strangers to love me back. It's lovely if people like me, appreciate me, respect me. That gives me warm glows. I love a bag of praise cookies as much as the next person. I am a weak, shallow, vain woman like that. Yes, praise me all you like. I love it. But I don't need it. And that's been a long journey. It's a lifetime journey, I think, to get to that point where you just go, well, you know what? You can just stand in your own power and you can just be who you are and you can say what you need to say and people will accept that or they won't. And if they don't, okay, that's on them. Maybe I'm not for them at this time, maybe not for them ever. Maybe it fixes something in them to really dislike me. I don't know. That's okay. I don't need to psychoanalyze the world. So when I wrote this piece talking about my committee and how when I got to 40, I sacked my committee and threw them out and just thought, who was it that thought teaching was a great job? I mean, teaching is a great job if you love teaching. And I did like a lot of it and it ticked a lot of boxes for me. Otherwise, I would never have done it. But it wasn't my dream. That wasn't my dream. I was fulfilling somebody else's dream. Not consciously. Nobody ever consciously said to me, this is what you have to do, Julie, to be accepted. But I understood. I think with women, we get undermined in very subtle ways, that we intuit a lot of things that we're not allowed to do or not allowed to say, or there will be consequences to those things. So I had to throw a lot of that away when I got to to 40, I think, and start thinking seriously about, well, okay, I can see why you got that. And you invited that committee member to take a chair, but maybe you should now invite them to leave and get somebody more useful instead. And that's essentially what I did. And it's not easy. It's a hard thing to do, to start to unravel those things that you've probably had since you were a kid, or messages you picked up from teachers in school, and people told you couldn't sing, or people told you weren't very good at this, or somebody laughed at you trying something. But it's amazing how many people are handicapped by that, I think, their entire adult life, that they don't even want to go back and excavate because it's quite a painful, embarrassing memory of it. So yeah, there was a bit of work to do, but I wrote the blog to kind of say that this stuff is fine. It gets better. Not only is there life after 40, but I am happier now in my 50s than I have ever been. And I am more authentically me now in my 50s than I've ever been. And I am about to send my manuscript out on submission to publishers. And there's interest here and in the States in reading that, which is just amazing to me. And I have the most wonderful agent. I'm working on book 2. You know, I've done lots of other things, and I've made some films, and I've, you know, won some awards for them. And I did all of that after 40. And as a 50th birthday present, I got the Trans-Siberian train from Moscow to Beijing. And we went to Russian classes for a bit and did some Russian. And then we got the train from Moscow to Beijing, and it was a great adventure. And so there's been, a lot of trying and failing. And of course, there's been heartbreak. Of course, things are sometimes hurt and they're disappointing. And yeah, I mean, just like anybody else, I'll sit down and have somebody on my Twitter yesterday described as a power cry. And I love that phrase, and I'm pinching it. So yeah, I will sit down and I will have a big power cry. But then I carry on down my path and go, well, I can't give up, because I can't give up being who I am. And authentically who I am needs to do what I'm doing. So that's what I do. So my blog post was a bit of a hand across to say to younger women, oh, for goodness sake, I'm going to be 60 years old in a couple of months. And it's all right. Not only is it all right, it's fab. You know, I can't be 25 anymore. I can't have 25-year-old skin. I can't have 25-year-old body. I can't be 25. I don't want to be. 25 was fine, but 25 was just a step on the stage to being 55 and 65 and hopefully, you know, as old as you can go.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Magnificent Midlife Podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, share it, and leave me a review wherever you're listening. It really helps me get the message out. You can find out more information about this episode in the show notes at magnificentmidlife.com. That's also where you'll find strategies, support, and resources to help make your midlife magnificent. Get clarity on how to make the most of your next chapter. Help me change the world, one magnificent midlife woman at a time.